Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, a podcast in which I, your host Mark Ducano, talk to clever, articulate people in celebration of that most subjective and undefinable concept, comedy, and, in a cruel and unusual twist, ask my guests to try and define it. As my guest this episode would probably say, we don't feel our emotions in our heart, but in our amygdala. For she's not only a comedian, but a scientist who, with her regular panel show Comedy for the Curious, addresses issues of love, fear and personality from a scientific and comedic perspective. She'll be taking this show and her solo show $1 Million Maybe to this year's Edinburgh Fringe, where I'm sure audiences will take her to their amygdala. Comedian Robyn Perkins.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How have you been?
I'm all right. Yeah, I am all right. I'm good. I have coffee, which I'm clinging to for dear life. And I'm good to go. Don't worry.
Terrific. Okay, so obviously you're an American. So I want to understand the timeline here from being a scientist in the US to being a comedian in the UK. What came first? The science, the comedy?
Definitely the science. So yeah. I wanted to be a marine biologist from the age of 6, and then went to university, had some internships, and then worked a bit in science, and then decided that was not for me. I needed to be more creative, at which point I did architecture as well. Yeah, so I did a couple of years in architecture school, and then switched to landscape architecture, which I usually just say architecture because people think that landscape architecture is like planting gardens, which it is not. Very different. But so I did that, and that's actually what brought me over to the UK. To work at a firm in Old Street, and then fell in love with London, and then switched to a much bigger firm. Worked on the 2016 Rio Olympic Park, was like the last thing I worked on. And then in around that time, I basically started comedy. I had my first gig I had one gig in 2011, so kind of 2012, and then was kind of doing both at the same time, and then quit my day job in 2015. So now I am full-time doing comedy. So yeah, and in that, which I'm very lucky in that I got my legal rights to be here through architecture. So. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. But I don't talk about the architecture side of my past because it's not as funny. So a lot of there is a lot of crossover. So in landscape architecture, because we're working on systems, and like there was a lot of research in it. So there's that research mentality of things like I worked on a hospital in Vienna, and so did like 2 weeks of intensive research on like healing gardens and healing landscapes, and how to decrease your stress levels outside of medicine, and how what kinds of actual things that you can do to decrease healing times, and had physical therapy gardens. So there's a lot of that whole thing of research being applied to the arts through landscape architecture. So yeah.
Wow. So. That's a lot more intense than I would have expected. Yeah. What made you make the change into comedy? What was it? Sort of, so I'm going to take all of this training and learning, and I'm going to say, I'm going to be a clown instead. Yeah.
I got into comedy on a whim. So when I was at the architecture firm, a friend of mine was like, I'm going to do a comedy course. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, all right, sure. And it's not the first profession I have gotten into on a whim. Kind of the exact same thing happened with architecture, and I've just in both situations actually threw myself into it knowing nothing, and had very similar experiences. Like when I the first day of architecture school, we went around introducing ourselves, and everybody had to say who their famous architect or their favorite architect was. Right. And I knew nothing about architecture because this wasn't a lifelong goal for me. So I just copied the person before me. And then the first day of this comedy course, again, we're introducing ourselves and have to say our favorite comedian. Mm-hmm. And I mean, luckily I did come up with one on my own, but that's because very randomly when at one point in time, I was doing coral reef research in Grand Cayman, actually saw Mitch Hedberg live, which is incredible. But I had no idea how important that was, but it was my first stand-up comedy gig, and I still remember some of his set. Like it was an incredible experience. But yeah, it was on a whim. Just took a comedy course, fell in love with it, and yeah.
And how did the course did it end with like a showcase and where you have to perform? Yeah, and how did that go for you?
Really well, actually, better than most people expected. So we had, I think most people in the course don't still do stand-up, I would say. I'm trying to think. There's one of them went on to write a BBC sitcom and was quite successful. And I think apart from that, I'm the only one who's still going, maybe. But throughout it, because I think a lot of people in the course had some sort of knowledge as to what stand-up comedy was. And I had gone to probably about 4 or 5 stand-up comedy gigs in my life. So I didn't know. And then something happened when I actually learned the jokes that I was writing. And and during the showcase, everyone was like, wow, Robyn's actually good. But yeah, it went really well. I used it for my video for a very long time, and recently rewatched it, or got about a minute in. And my girlfriend was like, you got to turn this off or I am never going to want to kiss you again. So it was, but for a first gig, it was good.
So comedy wasn't a huge part of your life beforehand when you were, as a researcher. You say you went to 1 gig and then like maybe 4 gigs. So you didn't go to a lot of shows or think, this is an option for way down in the future.
No. And I feel bad saying that because I feel like it should have been a lifelong thing. It just wasn't. And granted, from the second I held a mic, I was like, this is amazing. This is what I want to do. Yeah. And I love how comedy has an opportunity to send a greater message. Like it can just be funny, but it also can be more than just funny. And so I love that.
Was it always part of the plan that you would introduce the science into the comedy? Did you know that from the outset?
No, that's also another interesting story. So for a while, I was just telling dick jokes. That was it. I was very superficial dating stories. And I was friends with Binti of Hot Water, and they were at this point in time still in the Holiday Inn and had just bought like Seal Street, and they wanted basically they were like, we needed design. Do you want to help us out? So I went up to Liverpool for 3 days, and Pinty and I just drew, like actually designed the club. And before I left, like took spray paint cans, we had a contractor in and basically laid out everything. And so designed the club for them. But in those 3 days that I spent with Binti, he was like, no offense, but you are way more interesting than your comedy would suggest. And I was like, oh, all right. And that, I don't know, something there started triggering, like, actually, I have a past, maybe I should look into this. And in writing some bits with other people, my way of thinking, I always thought everybody did this. So like, for example, if you wanted to write a bit on a roller coaster, my first instinct is to go, okay, let's do some research. When were roller coasters invented? Like how many people have died on them? All of these, like I get the facts and then write the jokes on that. And so even in the dating bits that I did, there were things about like, I mean, this is going to sound really bad because they're really old jokes, but there is one about Weight Watchers and like the point system, and how like you could sleep with men to like calculate the points to like decrease, you could keep more money, and like but even then there's like this mathematical equation of like, okay, if I sleep with this guy that's really rambunctious, then I can have a candy bar later, like that kind of premise. I had a math problem about wanking on the tube, like it.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's just those things where I guess that's just the way my brain works, of like, oh, let's turn it into math and science. And then as soon as I started to do that, writing became a lot easier and a lot more natural. But also kind of learned that is not the way that most people write material. Start with research and then go into the jokes. So I did a bit of that for a while. And then the first time, or actually, no, I think it was the last time, because I'd have my solo shows that would combine science and comedy. But then my club set was still quite different. And the last time I was in Australia, I was doing a week at the Sydney Comedy Store, and was hanging out with the guy who runs it, but then also one of the other acts that was on, and they were like, I don't understand why you don't do science comedy in your club set. I was like, because I don't think people can like take it. And that one also, the next night they were like, if you don't do so, I am going to introduce you as a science comedian so that you have to do it. And like, so, which was, I think that was Valentine's Day, like around Valentine's Day of 2020. So, so I mean, the love stuff did work, but then I was like, all right, you know what, I am gonna start doing this. So that was another big moment that changed everything. But then a couple of weeks later we went into lockdown. And that is where Comedy for the Curious was born. And yes, so that's really changed a lot. So now if you look at my club set, it's probably about 50-50 of I mean, you don't tell that it's science comedy, but there's like, I've learned better how to like slip in the facts. So I feel like I'm just rambling now.
No, not at all. So let's talk about Comedy for the Curious then. So, well, how would you describe it? Would you call it a mixed bill, or would you call it like it's almost like a panel? How does it work for you?
I've been struggling. The marketing of it is really tough, because if you side too much with the science, then you alienate the non-scientists, but it's not overly science. And I've learned how to do science comedy in a way that you don't have to know anything about science to find it funny and get it. But then equally, if you ignore the science, then people don't know what they're watching. And also it could be a selling point. So I've really struggled about trying to get the balance. The best tagline that I've come up with is a stand-up comedy panel show with a science twist. Because it's about like 60-70% stand-up comedy, and then about 50-50 maybe chat and then game. So
have you found people who were watching, particularly because it was online, did you find that you worried about whether the science was overpowering, or like people go, oh, what are you talking about? I don't understand.
Well, we found a really good format on Zoom. So, and luckily our numbers weren't so ridiculous that we could leave people's mics on, or actually it was pretty self-regulating. So found out that the people who were okay with having their mics on was actually pretty low, around like 15 people. And that gave enough of a laughter to kind of see, and you could see people's faces and how they're engaged. Having said that, we do draw a crowd that wants that kind of thing. So they're going to be more engaged. But it's
they weren't just sat there with their jaws open. And
I know. So we've done it live a few times. And it's been, for the most part, good. Like for the most part, like we've had a really positive response. Having said that, most of the live ones have been like love, personality, confidence, things that like topics that are generally more universal. But also, I mean, it has gone down really well, but I don't know if that's because people who have come are already into that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think about the shows, because it's also really tough because I was during lockdown writing a new topic every week, which is insane when I think about it, because it's just like doing the research and then writing a basically 1,800 word monologue after the research, which is, a third of an Edinburgh show every week. And so once we came out of lockdown, I haven't been able to test the show in the way that I want. Like normally when I write a bit, it is new until I have done it 10 times. And even still, it's kind of new. And then when I've done it 50 times, then I'm like, oh no, this is a bit that I like. Whereas this, I'm like writing it, performing it when I within hours of me finishing writing it. And then I'm trying to take it to the stage. So I think probably one of the worst responses in terms of audience laughter was we did Confidence and Imposter Syndrome, and it wasn't that people didn't like it, they did. I think in that show, because it had only been performed online twice, maybe 3 times, and then live in front of an audience, I don't know if it just wasn't tight enough, or I didn't know it well enough, which is also a very important thing. And I don't know, or if it was just too dense of science, I don't know, or maybe it's just the crowd on the day. You just, I mean, you can't, you absolutely cannot evaluate the quality of a show when you've only done it once. But we'll see. I mean, we're taking it up to Edinburgh. So we have 4 subjects on rotation, which is good. We will see. But they are, again, the topics that I have done the most. So
while we're on subject of doing Zoom shows, you also have another show called Laugh Train Home, which you also did over Zoom, and it's got 2 venues for that, I think. Is that right?
Yes, but so I did do it over Zoom a bit. It was very short-lived. I think it was only like a few months, and then realized that that's not really what I want to be focusing on. So it was fine. It was just I think the difference is, so this is the reason why I just gave you a look, which you can't hear audibly, is that Laugh Train Home, I started in 2013 so that I could learn how to MC. And now I know. But I have recently handed over the Laugh Train Home to other people, so I am no longer Laugh Train Home, which is very well. It's technically one of the venues. I mean, we've had anywhere between, I think we had up to 4 venues maybe at one point in time. The Thursday nights, which are now a new material night, are run by Jacob Hatton, and I am handing over, I mean, it has been handed over, but Ben Vandervelde of Good Ship is taking on the Battersea one. And so my last week of booking and being involved is August 17th, which is a very exciting and big step for me to let go.
And is that because you've got other projects or just more to concentrate on? Why the change? It's,
I think a bunch of reasons. I think I want to focus on me and my brand and who I am as a comedian. And if you look at the shows, Laugh Train Home is a lineup show of comedians, and it can exist without me. It's just a lineup, not just a lineup, but it's a lineup of comedians. Comedy for the Curious is me. It's who I am, and it can't exist without me. Like if I get sick, the whole show has to pull, because it is my science comedy that is the core of the show. And so I think if I'm going to put time into something, it will be that. And I don't have time to do both. I mean, Laugh Train Home on the Wednesdays, the one that you've been to, runs weekly throughout the year, and it's relentless. Acts canceling, just it takes way more time than you think. And I want to be seen as a comedian. I like as a host, as a science comedian, I don't want to be seen as the person who runs Laugh Train home.
Okay.
It's a big step, but it's an exciting one.
So even though you approached comedy on a whim, did you draw inspiration from the comedians that you'd seen beforehand? Was there anyone who sort of thought, that's the sort of person that I want to be, perhaps?
I think I did once I started. I had a little note. I had a secret note in my phone that every time somebody would mention a comedian that I clearly should have known, I would, but didn't. And I'd always be like, and then I'd write it down in my little note in my phone of comedians that I should know, which I'm just looking into my phone because it would be probably really embarrassing. Of the people were like, comedians I should know. Emma Phillips on there. Beth Weiss, Mark Steele. That's
an eclectic mix.
It is an eclectic mix. Michael Palin. I would just sneak it up and then just because I don't want to be like, oh, Chris Rock, never heard of him. But I think once I got going, the two people that have influenced me the most maybe would be Robyn and Sarah Pascoe. So Robyn, obviously for the science comedy, but I think stylistically, like his energy and the way that he performs, I'm like I mean, we're not the same people, obviously, like personally, we're very different, but in terms of like stylistically and using science to talk about everyday life, is very much, what I do. And Sarah Pascoe, I've always admired her way to talk about bigger issues embedded in comedy in a really accessible way. So.
Yeah. How do you feel that your comedy in general is seen or approached differently in cross-culturally, like in the States? And obviously you mentioned your shows in Australia. How does it come across? What do you have to make changes? Do you have to rewrite whole sections, or is it broadly understood?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's broadly understood. I mean, obviously there's individual specific references that you have to change every time you go to like names and products and things like that. I think there's more of a crossover, like a more fluid transition between Australia and England than is in the US. I don't perform a lot in the US. And I think there's many reasons for that. I mean, I don't go home that often, but also the Boston scene is a very odd one to break into because I sound like them, so I'm no longer exotic. I'm not like a visiting comedian, but I'm not there enough to become one of them. But it was interesting. I had a joke that I did ages ago about American cocktails, which I don't know if you know this, that especially around Boston, New England, but I think it's all over the States. We have a very famous and loved drink called the Irish car bomb, where you have a half of a shot of Jameson, half a shot of Bailey's, and you drop it in a Guinness and you down it. And it's very... That
sounds horrible.
Yeah, it is. Because if you don't drink it fast enough, it curdles. Like, it's not like... and you do it a lot at university. I mean, it's all over university. And weirdly, so before I moved here, like, you drink them on St. Patrick's Day. It is seen as a tribute to the Irish because we love them, which is you just sit there and like, how have you not thought that through? Like, how have you not thought that through? And it wasn't until I moved to the UK that I was like, oh, that's offensive.
Yeah.
Now, any comedian that knows that fun little fact is going to draw an analogy between an Irish car bomb and 9/11. It's just going to happen. I'm not the only comedian on the circuit that has one, but I had one where I went through all of like the offensive cocktails because we had another one that was like a Long Island iced tea. And then you add blue carousel and it's called a Mongolian motherfucker, which I'm like is
nice.
Morally wrong, historically accurate, fine. Then you have like the one where it combines Midori and pineapple juice. And they call it a Pearl Harbor. So yeah, I mean, these are but again, and Americans don't think that like, wow, that's really offensive. So then of course I am like, that's like ordering a double Manhattan on the rocks and calling it a Twin Towers. Now it's no, I mean, it's fine. Like, it's not the most inventive. Like, if you actually, anybody that had my sort of knowledge, of the drinks, fine.
Yeah.
But I did that joke in the States at a gig, and somebody was just like, you are so brave doing that joke. I mean, if somebody were to just video you and put you on YouTube, you just get canceled immediately. And I was surprised at the fear of cancellation, because it's like, it's not the most inventive joke. It's not like, it's fine, but I wouldn't call it especially edgy. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just like, no, it's just a fact. Like, so that was surprising that I felt like people, at least on the ground level in Boston, were weary of cancellation as much as they were. And that was probably back in like 2017, 2016. Yeah.
So when you started out in comedy in let's say 2012, you did a lot of the competitions. Did you like gong shows and things like that? How did they go?
I think the only gong show I've ever done is the Blackout. I think I hated those. So my competition year was kind of 2015, although I made it into the Bath New Act finals in 2012, and it still remains to this day one of my top 3 worst gigs I've ever done in my entire life.
Wow.
That was fun. It's the year Harriet Kemsley won, and I'm almost like proud of this, actually. Not proud of it. That was a weird way to say that. I should not have been there. I had been going like 3 months, and everybody else had been going well over a year. And there was a review, and it said, are the new acts any good? Emphatically yes, with the possible exception of an American girl with a spectacularly obscene rant about her genitals. And I was very grateful that the reviewer did not mention my name in it. So it's actually quite hard to find. However, it was a gig in Bath on a Sunday night, and you had to do 7 to 8 minutes of material, and I had 7 minutes material, and I didn't have the experience. I mean, if you gave me the same jokes I had now, I could sell them and I could own it and be like, look, you guys don't want sex material, but this is what you're going to get, right? This is all I have to do it. So either get on board or get a drink or check out your phone. It's fine. And I could have done it, but I didn't have the experience, and I died horribly. But my main competition year was 2015, and I made it to the finals of like a lot of them. Like around there, it was English Comedian of the Year. Made it to the finals of that. I think it was his first year. Funny Women, Laughing Horse, Bobby Knight's competition. There's another one up north that I made it to the finals, but then was out of the country, so couldn't go. There are a bunch. There was like, at least 6, I think.
Yeah.
However, I wasn't ready. I was fine. My material wasn't interesting enough. Because it was just dating stories. I was talking twice as fast as I do now on stage, which is ridiculous. Like, I listen back to some of the recordings and like, I can't even understand what I'm saying. I just wasn't ready to get enough out of them. So while I made it to the finals of a lot of things, I was very much middle of the road to the bottom of the road of the finals. So, I mean, English Comedian of the Year, I did kick ass. Like there, I did. I had a really good gig, but yeah. Who won though? I think Jack Campbell won. Scott Bennett, I think, came in second that year. Maybe he won. Maybe Scott won. Maybe he won. I don't know who won that year. That was the year I was in. Anyway, but yeah, those, I mean, competitions it's a weird thing. It's so high pressure, and you think it's everything, and it can be, but if I had it to do over again, I would have waited.
Right. Do you think competitions have an impact on a career, on your career?
Weirdly, I think it hurt me
Okay.
because I don't think I was ready. And I
Okay.
think a lot of industry saw me being fine.
Yeah.
And
Fine. Yeah.
I am really struggling now. Now that I am good enough, I am really struggling to get industry to notice me. And I don't know if that is because I was seen as a promoter for so long. I don't know if they have a vision of me of what I was in 2015, 2016, which I'm not that same comedian. But I don't think the competitions helped me. They may have in the short term to get people's attention, but I wasn't ready for their attention. And I didn't know that.
Well, how do you feel about awards and reviews, either personally for you or just generally? Do they have merit?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of competitions that do have merit. And I think, for example, So You Think You're Funny, I think it's really good that they have a time limit as to when you can enter. So everyone's on the same playing field. Having said that, the amount of people that get in there and do that show by being like, well, I wasn't regularly gigging until here, so actually I can still be a part of it. And you're like, I was like, yeah, like on technicalities, for example, when I did So You Think You're Funny, I had been going 3 months and had nothing but dick jokes and obviously didn't make it very far at all. Julia actually wrote me, because after the heat, you had to send your semifinal dates. And I wrote to her and was like, look, I know I'm not getting through. Here are my dates, but I know. And she was like, look, she was like, you have really great stage persona, but your jokes aren't good enough. So talk to me when they are. Which is very sweet of her. But in my heat was Aisling B. And that is, I mean, yeah, there was.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I was like, I'm not getting through. But I think she had been acting for a while before that. And so for me, I had never been on a stage prior to, but which is, so it's tough to get people in the right playing field. I think competitions are a really good way to get people to be seen who haven't been seen, because I think they're the closest thing to a meritocracy. If you have ones that are set up with like proper judges as long as the people who running the competition aren't skewing the results at all, I think they can help. I think they didn't help me because I have a very American mentality and I'm like, just do it, you can do it, you're awesome, and I was not ready. I mean, the only thing, being in the Funny Women final, Dawn Ward was one of the judges, and off the back of that, I got a 5 at the Comedy Store, so that's why I never had to do the gong. But after he had when I tell the story, some people say that it comes off bad, but I think it was very honest. Like, it was harsh but honest, and he was absolutely right. I had my talk, I think it was after my first 10, when he was like, look, I'm going to use a football analogy. Don't know if you watch football. And I was like, no. And he was like, look, here at the Comedy Store, we have Premier League material. You don't have Championship League material. I was like, oh. Just like a gut shot, but at the same time, absolutely right. That was like 2015. I didn't have good material. My jokes weren't, he was 100% right. So I think in that case, like, competitions, if you wait long enough, if you wait till you're ready, then they are a good way to get your name out there. Yeah. But you don't have like mentors to be like, I'd wait another year. Like, nobody's gonna sit you down and tell you that. I think reviews are tough because I think there is no regulation as to who can review your show. And it's also because there are so many people that want them. It is obviously really hard to get one. And in that sense, it is, if you are somebody who is struggling for industry, like, acknowledgement, if you are not one of the cool kids, you're not going to get a review. Like, 2019, I brought up, like this amazing show, and my PR managed to get Chortle in, which I got 4 stars on Chortle, which is a great show. Like there are not a lot of shows that got 4 or higher from Chortle, and didn't get any more reviews. Like at no point in time did any of the reviewers go, oh, maybe that's a good show that we should review. And like I managed to get Fringe Biscuit in as well, because they like, I personally, but it's so hard to get people in, and you review the popular shows that everyone's buzzing about. And so I think that from that standpoint, while it's really helpful, it's also really hard if you're not one of the cool kids in comedy.
Yeah.
Controversially, I think that all reviews should be paid for. I think that there should be like a standard rate for reviews. And I think this is like very controversial. I get this. Like you're giving me this look like,
I'm enthralled.
Because I think that if it was regulated more, then there would be a certain level of standard for reviewers. I had 2 reviewers come in drunk, 15 minutes late and drunk, to review my show. Wow. And then when I contacted the publication, they at first apologized. Then they were like, well, I've just talked to them. They said that that's not what's happened. I'm like, I record every single one of my shows. I have it on audio. I have it on video that they showed up late, were drunk and heckling. And then they were like, well, we'll just agree to disagree. And I was like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, it's bullshit that you don't believe me. But so I think that there should be some sort of regulation, but also I think if everyone was paid for, then there'd be a bigger opportunity for more reviewers. Because right now Edinburgh is so expensive that publications are going up for like 2 days because they're not getting paid. And not that it would be like a lot, but you could, I don't know, like 30 quid, 40 quid, 50 quid, something where it's like the hour of time to watch the show and an hour to review it. And then you have like a certain level of experience, or like I don't know. I just think that way the little guys that aren't the popular people could actually get reviewed, so that if you have a really great show, people could know about it.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I think that's my biggest frustration with Edinburgh, is that I came back from that Fringe in 2019, and a friend of mine who's an author brought a friend to see like my show that I did at Angel a couple weeks after the Fringe. And this friend of a friend, her husband is a TV producer. And after the show, she was like, I went up to the Fringe with him for 2 weeks, specifically scouting for female new comedians. And your show is better than anything I saw. And I don't know why we wouldn't go and see it. 2 weeks just to seek out new female comedians, and I was not on the list. And it's not like I was at Underbelly. I had a producer. I went not on the list, and it's very it's tough. It's really tough to try to get noticed. Sorry, I've now gone into a rant about. I sound very bitter.
I have a controversial opinion about reviewers.
I want to hear it. Let me know. What do you think?
I think there should be a capacity-based limit on what shows they can review. So if it's a big stadium or arena, you're not allowed in. Basically, they don't need you, and we know it's going to be good because there's going to be 1,000 people there. So if reviewers can only go into small shows, then those people are going to get reviews and going to get exposure. Plus, it will force big names to go into small rooms, and then that will help support small venues.
Yeah, it's true.
That's my opinion.
I mean, it's been thrown out there of like a capacity limit for somebody had said this, and it seems like a crazy idea, but a capacity limit for all venues at Edinburgh, because I see both sides of the argument that if you want a really big name, like having a big name at the Fringe will draw people to go to the Fringe, full stop. And that is good because people will see other shows while they're up there. On the other hand, if you sell out a 1,000-seater, that is, 950 tickets that are not being sold for somebody else. That's like, it's 1,000 seats that can fill what, 200 shows. No, 20 shows.
Yeah.
That would fill 20 shows. That would sell out like 20 shows in paid venues.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
so I don't know, but I know reviews are a tough thing.
When I go to the Fringe every year, I set a financial limit because obviously I see as many shows as possible and I don't have any money. So I say, well, I'm not paying more than, like, it used to be £10, but I had to bump it to 12 this year because all the prices have gone up. But basically, you say, well, if you're priced over this amount, I'm not going because you're too big. So I'm going to go and see the smaller venues. I go to a lot of free Fringe venues and places like that. So that way you meet all the new comedians.
Yeah.
And you hear all the newest material and fresh upcoming ideas and things instead of seeing the stuff that you've probably seen and heard on telly already.
Yeah.
Just a theory.
Like that. Yeah.
So have you had a moment then where something happened? It might be an instance on stage, or it might be a comment from another comedian or something, moment in time that you just said, yeah, I'm doing exactly the right thing. This is perfect for me.
That's really hard. I'm also really indecisive. So,
or it doesn't have to be one if you've got more than one.
I know. I'm just like,
this
is really hard. I don't know. I mean, I've had one of my coolest moments performing was in Perth Fringe World when I did on the last Saturday, my normal venue was something else. And so I did a 350 seater theater. And it's not that I haven't done nights that are bigger than that, but it was doing my hour and knowing that those people were coming just to see me. And that's quite a different thing, where it's like, I've been on mixed bills of bigger shows, but that was like, all of you people are coming just for me. Like, that's I'm the only comedian that's on. That was really special. And getting the 4 stars in Chortle was pretty awesome. It's going to sound really lame, but it actually means a lot. But last night, one of the bartenders at Top Secret Comedy was like, because they see a lot of comedians and a lot of big ones, and he was like asking who was on, and he was like, you and Nathan Caton are my 2 favorite comedians. I think you're the best 2 comedians. And I'm like, well, and I was like, you're just like, say, he's like, no, really, I've seen so much comedy and you 2 are my favorite. And I was like, that is more of a compliment than you think it is. Like, that's really, that was very sweet. Yeah. All right.
Have you learned any key lessons that you sort of take forward and think, these are things I always have to remember and take with me from show to show?
The best bit of comedy advice that I ever learned or heard is that you can't be seen too late. You can only be seen too early. And once somebody sees you, you can't unsee that. So just wait until it's your time. Yeah. That's probably the best advice that I've heard. And I wish I'd heard earlier than I had. But I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the shows that you're taking to Edinburgh, because you've mentioned already that you're taking Comedy for the Curious up there. Is that because of the panel nature of it? Is that different people each time, or do you have because you've got 4 rolling subjects? Have you got 4 rolling panels?
No, I have different. I have some comedians who are doing more than one, but different subjects. So no comedian is doing the same subject twice. Right. So, and I have about probably 30 or 40 different guests right now. I have a few spaces left, but so the 4 subjects are love, but I am breaking that down into 2. Love and personality are such big subjects, and I think my bit can only be about 10 minutes long. So I think every day I'm going to do love part 1, love part 2, personality part 1, personality part 2, and then accents and cats versus dogs. So those are, it's technically love, personality, accents, and cats versus dogs. Those are the 4. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you're also doing your solo show, $1 Million Maybe. What's that all about? So
that is about bi visibility and whether or not we can prove anything is kind of the tagline. So the show basically parallels my story of realizing that I was bisexual 5 years ago, along with there's a sexual orientation scientist who published an article in lockdown saying that there is evidence that bisexuals exist, and that it's me kind of basically looking into his history and who he is as a person, and his story across the year, and whether or not that is a total bullshit thing to do to scientifically prove that we exist, or if there is merit in that, and whether or not you can, and looking in the bigger picture of the world, like, can you actually prove anything? Yeah.
Do you think attitudes in comedy towards basically people who aren't me, straight white men, have changed? I mean, what's been your impression?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, sometimes when you get on stage as a woman, you can feel, it's hard to describe, but I feel like most female comedians would know what I'm talking about, where you get on stage and there's this feeling in the room of like, oh, you're a woman. And that happens a lot less than it used to. Like nowadays, I can like pinpoint certain gigs where I'm like, I mean, it happened a couple months ago that, it was a lot harder work. And then the headliner was also female. And afterwards she said the exact same thing that I was thinking. And we're both like, yeah, it's one of those. But now, I mean, that happens a lot less now, which is great. But I think people are wanting more voices.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. So when and where can we see the shows?
Okay, so $1 Million Maybe is at 5 p.m. every day at the Gilded Balloon. TV it in the balcony room, except for not the 15th.
Yep.
And Comedy for the Curious is on every day at 8 p.m. at 32 Below, which is part of Counting House, or next to Counting House, basically in that Counting House complex. 8 p.m. every day, not the 15th. Yeah.
Also, where can we follow you? Where can we find you on social media?
Yes, I am Robyn H. Perkins. So it's Robyn with a Y, on Instagram and Twitter, and Miss Robyn Perkins on Facebook.
Okay. Links to those in the shows will be in the show notes. So finally, Robyn, can you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
I'm going to need another hour.
It has to fit in the nutshell. That's the premise.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Comedy is fun, smart, and limitless.
Nice.
Does that fit in a nutshell?
Yeah. It could have a larger nutshell it could have a whole coconut shell if you want to.
Oh. Okay. No, I think I want to leave it there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, so I appreciate you taking part. Thank you for coming.
No, thank you for having me. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.